Hello everyone, welcome back to Algebra 51, Solving the Mysteries of Algebra, and we have today chapter 1.3, Solving Linear Equations. Now, if you look on my screen here, you'll see transformations that produce equivalent equations. Now, these are the four properties that you're going to use when you're solving these linear equations. So let's go ahead and get started. The first one is the additional property of equality. It's saying if you add the same number to both sides, if A equals B, then A plus C equals B plus C. That makes sense, right? If A equals B, let's say A equals 2 and B equals 2. If you add A to one side and you add B to the other side, it's the same thing because it's the same thing. I mean, 2 plus 3, and then over here, that equals 2 plus 3. I added, this one right here is A, and this one right here is B. Same thing, right? So that one's one of the properties you're going to have to remember, because that's one of the things that we do to solve these problems. Same thing with the subtraction of properties. If you look right here, you have the A minus B and B minus C. It's the same thing. You subtract it, it's the same thing. Same thing with multiplying. If you multiply A times C times B times C. Now we're assuming that A and B are equal here. Now, and C is not equal to 0, by the way. Because anyway, the thing is here is if you do the same thing to each side, you're going to get the same result. Okay? So let's look at another one, division property, the same thing. You do the same thing to both sides of an equation. It keeps it balanced, and you haven't messed with the equation. That's basically what these four principles are about. Is do the same thing to both sides of the equation so that the equation remains equal. And if you can do that, you can manipulate these things any way you want and try to make them and try to find and solve that problem. Now we're going to start with the very first problem here is 5x. 5x minus 14 equals 21. Very easy problem. Now, don't let it fool you. The first thing you're going to do is you want to isolate this x right here. This right here needs to be isolated. And in order to isolate it, you've got to have a number. You have to do something. You have to subtract or add or something, but you have to make sure you do it to both sides of the equation. So in this case, we're going to add 14 to this side, and we're going to add 14 to this side. Now, if you notice, when you add 14 to both sides, this right here goes away. This is gone. What in the world? I don't know why it's doing that. Some type of auto thing on my thing. But anyway, it goes away, and this becomes 5x equals. Now, 21 plus 14 is 35. Now, we're starting to see where this is going. Now, the next thing you got to do is you got to do the same thing again. You got to do the same thing to both sides of this equation. So we're going to divide both sides by 5 so I can get the x isolated by itself. And we're going to divide by 5 on both sides. Now, 5 divided by 5, 1. So now this is just x. And then on this side, 35 divided by 5, very easy, 7. And there's your answer. Answer is 7. How's that? Pretty easy, right? Very easy problem. Now, if we go down, if we can try something a little bit, go ahead and continue copying all that. And we're going to go to a little more difficult problem here. Second problem we're going to go to, and then we'll slide on up here. We're just going to draw a black line here to separate the two. I think that's black. Next is going to be, the problem is going to be 2x plus 6, now watch this, equals 21 minus x. Now that's a little bit different because now we have a variable on both sides. So now what do? My first instinct is to get those variables together. So the first thing I need to do is I need to do the opposite of what this is. Now this is a negative, this is a minus x. So I'm going to put a plus x here. And I'm going to put a plus x here. Now you can't put it up underneath the 6 because you can't add like unlike terms. Now draw a line. And the next problem is, and the answer is going to be 3. Well, it's not the answer. It's the next step of the answer. 3x plus 6 equals 21. And this minus x and plus x, they cancel each other out. So they're gone. Now I have to write it squiggly because the computer thinks I'm trying to draw something else and automatically draws a funky line somewhere. But anyway, so now we have 3x plus 6 equals 21. Next step will be is to subtract this 6 here. Let's use a different color as we do it. Subtract the 6 and subtract 6. And the answer so far, that'll be 3x. And the 6 goes away because 6 minus 6 is 0. And then you got 21 minus 6 here. 21 minus 6 is 15. And that's not a very dark green, is it? I think that's a better green. Just I'm just too picky about this stuff. And we'll draw it in here. Okay, now next we're going to have the let's move this up a little bit so I can slide it in the way. There we go. All right, so next we're going to do, I'll probably use a red next. Now the next thing we got to do is we got to figure out what x equals. We've got one more step to do, and that's dividing by 3. Dividing by 3. And that becomes, what's that become? That right here, 3 divided by 3, that becomes x. And then over here, this is 15 divided by 3, easy peasy. Pow. There's your answer. Very fast, very easy. Now, I'm going to go ahead and give you one to do. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write this problem down, and I want you to write this problem down yourself, and I want you to practice it. Now, I want you to understand something. With all this technology and all of the the phones, the cell phones, you can take pictures of notes and stuff like that. It doesn't do you any good if you don't write it down. Now you say, oh, I got the book with me, I can write it down, I don't have to take notes down. Wrong. Just because you have the book doesn't mean your brain has to process this stuff. And in order for you to process it, you got to write it. You got to go from your hand to your head. You have to write this stuff down. If you don't, you're not going to remember it. I'm going to tell you an old story I had from when I was in college. I had a class that I took, and the professor told me, hey, you can write whatever notes you want to write on one piece of paper, and you can take it into the classroom during the exam. And I thought, oh my God, that's great. I can write every note I need to write. He goes, but it's got to be on the piece of paper. That was his rule. So I did it. So I wrote everything I needed to write on that piece of paper. And you know what happened? I went to take the test, and I aced it. And guess what? But I never used that piece of paper, not once. And on my tests, I kept, well, darn, this is actually pretty easy. I started writing these notes on these papers, and I kept making A's. But I never used the paper. And I thought, well, darn, if I'm not even using the paper, what's the point? So the next test, I didn't take any notes on the paper. and I flunked the test, failed it. I was making A's, and then it dropped me from an A to a B. All because it was the writing of the notes on the paper that made it work for me. And I learned a valuable lesson then. You're processing stuff through your brain as you write. And that's something you might want to think about when you're doing these problems. And I'm not quite finished with this problem here. This is going to be a minus 21. Okay. I want you to go ahead and do this problem. Pause this video for a minute. And then we're going to start and then we'll go ahead and do the problem for you. Okay. Go ahead and pause. Okay, we're back. Now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start off. I like to do different colors so you can see where my actions are. Here we go. We got a minus. We're going to take this right here. We got 9x plus 6 minus 21. I'm going to isolate this 9, so I'm going to say a minus 6 here and a minus 6 here. And that makes that 9x equals negative 27. And of course, then I take this next step. And let's do this. Next step is going to be, what's next step? I need to divide by 9 and divide by 9. And this becomes x equals negative 27 divided by 9. A negative divided by a positive is a negative, so that becomes negative 3. And that's your answer. Anybody get it right? If you didn't get it right,